In August 1945, a single aircraft carried a single bomb toward a single city. Minutes later, the world had changed forever. This was not just the end of the Second World War. It was the beginning of a new and far more dangerous age, the age of the atom. The story of how we got here is one of science, of impossible decisions, and of a weapon so powerful it would cast a shadow over every war that came after. Let's break down what really happened carefully and with respect for everyone it touched. By the summer of 1945, the war in Europe was over. Germany had surrendered in May, but across the Pacific, the war against Japan ground on. For years, American and Allied forces had fought their way across the Pacific, island by island. Each one was defended with ferocious determination, and each one cost an enormous number of lives on both sides. As the Allies drew closer to Japan itself, the fighting only grew more brutal. Military planners looked ahead to the next step, a full invasion of the Japanese home islands, and what they saw frightened them. Based on the battles they had just fought, they expected casualties on a staggering scale for the soldiers and civilians of both nations. This was the grim question hanging over Allied leaders. How do you end a war against an enemy that will not surrender without a final battle that could cost hundreds of thousands or even millions of lives? And in the deserts of the United States, the answer to that question was taking shape in total secrecy. It was called the Manhattan Project. For years, thousands of the world's best scientists and engineers had been working on something that, until recently, had existed only in theory. A bomb that drew its power not from chemicals, but from the very heart of the atom. The idea was almost beyond imagination. By splitting the nucleus of an atom in a chain reaction, you could release energy on a scale the world had never seen. A single bomb could do the work of thousands. In July 1945, in the New Mexico desert, they tested it. The first atomic explosion in history lit up the sky. The theory was real, the weapon worked, and now the question was no longer whether it could be built, but whether and how it would be used. This is the part of the story that the world has debated ever since. The leaders who held this weapon faced a decision unlike any in history. On one side, the expected cost of invading Japan, a battle that could last into the following year and claim an almost unimaginable number of lives. On the other, a weapon that might end the war in days, but at a terrible and immediate human cost to the cities it struck. There was no choice here without profound consequences, and it is important to be honest. Historians still debate this decision to this day. Some argue it ended the war and ultimately saved lives. Others believe the war could have ended another way. We present the events. The moral weight of them is something every person must consider for themselves. A warning was issued, demanding surrender. When the war continued, the decision was made to use the new weapon. On the 6th of August, 1945, a single bomb was dropped on the city of Hiroshima. The explosion was unlike anything in the history of warfare. A single weapon destroyed a large part of the city in an instant, and tens of thousands of people lost their lives. It was a humanitarian catastrophe on a scale the world had never witnessed from one bomb. 3 days later, on the 9th of August, a second atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. The devastation was, once again, immense. We will not dwell on the suffering in detail out of respect for the victims, but it must be remembered clearly, behind these events were hundreds of thousands of human beings, and the consequences would be felt for generations. In the days that followed, Japan announced its surrender. On the 2nd of September, 1945, the formal surrender was signed aboard a battleship in Tokyo Bay. The deadliest conflict in human history, a war that had lasted 6 years and touched almost every nation on Earth, was finally over. But the end of one war was the beginning of something else. Here is the lesson that echoes far beyond 1945. For all of human history, the power of a nation had a limit. Now, for the first time, a single weapon could destroy an entire city in a heartbeat, and soon, weapons many times more powerful would follow. Warfare itself had changed. The great powers now held the ability to destroy not just armies, but civilization itself. And so, a strange new logic took hold of the world. The most powerful weapons ever built were the very weapons that could never be used, because using them might mean the end of everyone. The atom had ended the largest war in history, and in doing so, it placed a shadow over every conflict that has followed, a shadow we still live under today. The Second World War is where the modern world was forged, in its courage, its catastrophe, and in this final, world-changing weapon. The nuclear age that began over Hiroshima would lead, less than 20 years later, to the single most dangerous moment in human history, 13 days when the world stood on the very edge of nuclear war, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Subscribe, and we'll see you there.